So, what was it like for you to watch the election from China?
What was most different about being in China from being other parts of the world and perhaps from being in the U.S. is there was less emotional content to the election here, I think, than other places. This is a widely observed phenomenon in China, and I think I can explain it this way. One is there is a preference, there's been a preference for China for the familiar, known quantity in the U.S. of making no ripples. If it would have been possible to have George Bush in office for another 4 years, he would have won by a big landslide in China. Partly that's because he's been relatively good for China, partly because they always want more of the same. If it couldn't be George Bush, they would want to have Hillary Clinton, because she also was somebody they'd been familiar with in the past, despite some of her own disputes with China. And there were two other factors which I think affected the Chinese view. One is they view Democrats as being, on the whole, trouble for China on trade issues. So they thought, regardless of anything Obama said, there might be trade problems. And a delicate point, but a true one, the fact that Obama will be the first non-white president of the U.S., which was a symbolic plus in so much of the world, I think was a symbolic minus here. That attitudes, racial attitudes towards within China are what Americans would view as anachronistic. It is still quite natural for educated people to say that they view whites as talented and blacks as untalented, blacks as having bad work habits, blacks as not being educated. And so the idea that a black person could be the head of this powerful nation took more adjustment within China than in other countries.
Essential point here is that the Japanese are a homogeneous society, and they do have a purity hang-up. They do believe, and for the United States point of view, you might find this offensive, but they do believe that their strength is in their racial purity. Let's be quite frank about that. So under those circumstances, foreigners are always, on that definition, either a menace or an oddity. And now, of course, it's much better to treat them as a bit of an oddity than a menace.
They don't have a liberal philosophy that you can use against them, and a constitution that you can throw at them. They don't have that liberal image that they try to protect like the white folk that you used to tie them up with.